Coaching for game development is a complete scam. Now, before any of you pull out your dictionary and start quoting what the definition of a scam is, sure, I can agree with you to an extent that paid coaching or mentorship isn't always a scam according to the law. But often, it is very ethically questionable, and for some reason, everyone's too scared to talk about it. I totally understand most of these developers aren't intentionally misleading others for money, but if their goal is to genuinely help others with coaching instead of making money, they would be doing that for free. Even if you put the moral argument aside, how do these devs even know their coaching actually helps more than it hurts people? You could work in the game industry for well over a decade, but you'd still only be on the tip of the iceberg when it comes to knowledge and experience. In game development, there are no shortcuts, so whoever leads you to believe otherwise is selling you a dream more than the actual reality. How do you think Edmund McMillan or Jonathan Blow got to where they are today? They didn't go and get coaching from some game developer on YouTube, they put an unthinkable amount of hours into making video games. This doesn't just apply to being a game developer either. No professional artist, musician, or athlete got to where they are without a lot of hard work and time. Now, just because I say that doesn't mean all of your work is eventually going to pay off either. Take a look at how many views this video currently has. Now imagine all of those people are indie devs who want to make games for a living. How many of you will realistically end up succeeding? While these numbers aren't perfect, roughly 70% of indie games fail or never release. That means if this video has 1,000 views, only around 300 of you will ever release a game. Now, how many of those developers never end up releasing a second game? Well, that's around 70% as well. So out of the 300 people, only 90 will ever publish more than one game. Now, roughly, how many of those games made more than $10,000? Only about 12.5%. This means out of every 1,000 developers, only about a dozen even have a slight chance, because the actual number who make a sustainable living is actually much less. Hopefully you don't think I'm saying these things to scare you. My goal is to help people realize just how difficult it is to make a career out of game development, and this is often the very reason why people start offering paid coaching. These developers are usually in the exact same boat as you. The only difference is they're finding ways to monetize their audience of developers who are struggling to find success, which happens to be pretty much everyone. Now, I personally couldn't sleep at night if I was coaching game devs for money with only a few years of experience, but everyone's different. Of course, I'm not going to disagree and say it isn't smart to have multiple revenue streams as a game dev, but are you really willing to put the livelihood of others in your own hands just for personal benefit? While I'll never be able to stop game developers from offering these paid services, I can confidently say if you're one of those people who have been thinking about paying for something like this, you're much better off using that money on app credit fees and actually releasing games. You not only learn significantly more, but you'd also be investing that money into yourself instead of someone else. Of course, I'm not at all saying some developers haven't benefited from coaching before. I'm sure a lot of people have, but in the grand scheme of things, anything you learn from coaching, you could absolutely learn on your own for completely free. Now, if you feel like you're that stuck and need advice, there are many incredible game developers who have more experience making games than some of these coaches have even been alive for on this planet. Go check out people like Tim McCain or channels like GDC and start listening to game developers with wisdom instead of looking for answers to questions that don't exist. If you're wondering what's a good indicator for who's a trustworthy source and who's not, you can ask this one simple question. Does this game developer make more money from games or outside sources like coaching? If the answer is coaching, these people are not game developers. They're likely scammers profiting off vulnerable individuals like yourself. Of course, this isn't always the case because you need to be aware when there might be survivorship bias, confirmation bias, or any external factors that could potentially influence them. Now, I wasn't planning on talking about any channel specifically, but I've seen this one game developer mentioned so many times in comments on videos when it comes to this topic. While some people might not agree, I think there's a completely valid reason why people are so upset with them. You probably know who I'm referring to already, but this developer is Thomas Brush. Don't get me wrong, I think we can all agree he's a very talented game developer with a lot of experience, and I genuinely connect a lot with his passion-oriented approach to game development. When I first started making games, he was one of the first channels I started watching. Back then, he never used to plug his course, but now it seems like the only reason he uploads or streams is to tell people to go sign up or to mention it's on sale. There's also another major issue, which is basically his entire sales pitch. What if I said you could become a full-time game developer with only an idea? Well, that's the dream Thomas Brush seems to sell game developers, and if you don't believe me, just watch this or any one of his videos.
And by the way, did you know you don't have to wait until you're done with your game 3 years later after developing it to know if it's going to make some money? You can actually take a demo or a prototype of your game and you can sell it right now to publishers, investors, or on something like Kickstarter. It's possible to go full-time indie with just an idea, with a demo, and I want to show you how to do it.
I really don't know how anyone could listen to something like this and say he isn't trying to sell a dream for the low price of $800, because that's exactly what he's doing. I'm not at all arguing that getting publishers or community funding isn't a valid way to become a full-time game developer. The issue is when this becomes your main focus over the quality of your games. Are you really a game developer if you're more concerned about funding your game ideas than how your game actually sells to players? Also, when it comes to publishers, do you really think they're just waiting around to throw hundreds of thousands of dollars at anyone who wants to make a game? There are only so many publishers out there, and in this incredibly competitive industry. Not only that, but they aren't your friends either. Their only goal is to make money, and with that comes a lot of pressure and expectations. Potentially misleading people into this path just because they have the dream of being a full-time game developer could end up completely fucking someone's life over. I'm not sure if you've heard, but there are a lot of horror stories with indie developers and publishers out there. Sure, getting investors can help, but sometimes they can also do the exact opposite and create a lot of issues. Another thing he does, which really makes me raise an eyebrow, is how he always tries to remind his viewers in his videos and streams about his accomplishments. I can't even begin to explain how many times I've heard him say he's been published on 3 separate occasions, is a full-time solo dev, and was featured by Time and the Washington Post. I'm not sure about you guys, but I've seen a lot of really successful game developers who hardly ever boast about their accomplishments. So why does he feel the need to always mention these things? Well, the only answer I can imagine is because he's making a lot of money selling that image to people, and not just to his audience, but to publishers as well. Now, some of you might be wondering, what exactly was the premise of these articles he was featured in? Well, they focus entirely on his game's success on Kickstarter, and that's about it. There's also this article which talks about how he accidentally gave each of his Kickstarter backers 3,500 keys each. Pretty convenient plug to his Kickstarter, no? I don't see anything praising him for his work as a game developer. I only see articles talking about how much he was able to raise on Kickstarter. We already have a huge pandemic of Kickstarters from inexperienced developers looking for funding to make overly ambitious games. And preaching messages like this is exactly what creates this issue. Of course, there's nothing inherently wrong with Kickstarter if you have the experience to actually deliver on your promises. In fact, a lot of great games have come from it, but at what point does this start becoming predatory? I also find it interesting that the section on his website says, "I'm not just some guru, I've been published 3 times, as if that has anything to do with what being a guru actually means. If I released a successful game on Steam, started selling a course called Full-Time Game Dev, and told people they could sign up to make 100K from just a demo in all my YouTube videos, I'm pretty sure that would make me a guru. I don't understand what he's trying to prove by telling people this, as if it makes him more qualified to sell courses than someone who's maybe self-published. Don't get me wrong, getting 3 publishers is a big accomplishment, and that's clearly a huge testament to the quality of his work. He has an incredible talent for creating meaningful stories and immersive atmospheres, which is why I don't understand why he's selling courses telling game developers how they can replicate his story, make 100K from only a demo, and go full-time from pitching an idea to publishers and investors. It all just sounds like complete bullshit to me, and to be honest, I'm not even sure he really believes it himself either. The most successful game developers don't need to constantly remind others just how successful they are. Their game should be the ones speaking for them. Not to sound overly dramatic, but this is exactly why myself and a lot of others stopped watching his content. I don't at all think he's a bad person, and as a game developer, he's someone I look up to in a lot of ways. But if you're going to sell courses to your viewers, there's a much better way of going about it. I'm well aware this video is probably going to piss off a lot of people, but we need to stop repeating the cycle, pretending like some of these things are okay. There might be a point in your game development journey when you start struggling financially and need to look for other income streams, but selling coaching or courses is not the answer. I'll never judge developers for doing what's best for themselves, but when those decisions could potentially have a huge impact on other people, that irresponsibility is what really bothers me. Now, before I wrap things up, I just wanted to say, please don't send any hate to developers in the comments. I do my best to encourage having respectful conversations, so if you have thoughts on this, whether you agree with me or not, it's always valuable to hear things from other perspectives. As always, my name's Max Anderson. Thanks for watching, and see you beans in the next video.